This is our shadow pandemic.
I was a healthy 27-year-old who had no underlying conditions and was running every day to nothing.
I'm 33, and now I feel like I have the lungs of a 75-year-old.
Because like I'm the youngest person here. My roommate before this was like 90. My roommate now is 88 years old.
I would shake, I wouldn't remember, my eyes would roll back, I couldn't hold my head up.
And then about a week afterwards, like, I could not breathe.
For the first time in my life, I realized that I don't have control over my life.
At this point, I am, God, was it at 7, 8 months into this?
Like, if you ask me to do a burpee right now, I will faint. Straight up, I will faint. And it's been 148 days. I will absolutely faint.
At this time, I've already had it for like 6 weeks. And they tell me I need to try to walk. And I'm thinking like, of course I can walk. I've been walking. But for some reason, I couldn't walk.
Do we have any idea of the numbers of people who are getting long COVID at this point?
1 out of 3, you're looking at 50 million people, and that was before Omicron.
I'm Morgana. I'm a humanitarian, photographer, and filmmaker. And this is my husband, Yaku. He's a helicopter pilot. In 2014, we were living in Liberia, West Africa, when the world's largest Ebola outbreak erupted. I helped PCI Media share Ebola survivor stories through radio, TV, and social media, reaching nearly 10 million people. It helped curb the spread of the virus by driving changes in attitudes and behaviors. I saw the impact the storytelling had on communities in the middle of the outbreak. So when COVID-19 started spreading where we lived in 2020, we began documenting and sharing stories of COVID-19 survivors in New York to spread awareness about the disease. But we decided that wasn't enough. We wanted to show how COVID-19 is impacting people across America. So we moved out of our New York apartment and we moved into a 19-foot trailer so we could document COVID-19 survivors in all 50 states in America.
As we began making our way across America, we noticed that survival was not always the end of the story. We met men and women several months after their initial infection who were still experiencing a range of lingering symptoms impacting their lives from subtle to life-altering ways. One was Emily in Mobile, Alabama, a healthy 26-year-old with no pre-existing conditions. Emily contracted COVID in March 2020 after traveling through multiple airports in one day for work. We met up with her about 9 months later, and she still wasn't back to normal.
I was just traveling home from a work trip in an airport, and that was it. And it has changed my life forever, because about a week after that, I started showing symptoms. Much like anywhere else in the country, everyone was kind of like, oh, that won't happen here, not here. This won't be as big as everyone says it's going to be. I think it was all very underestimated. And then it just kind of came as a whirlwind. I had been training for a 10K that I ran at the end of February. So I'd taken about a week off from running and then was getting back into running that week. So I would run in the morning, box at night, and I just couldn't even get through one workout. I was exhausted. COVID didn't even cross my mind, like not once. Because the one thing everybody kept saying down here was you have to have a fever. I didn't have a fever once. And when urgent care was like, you need to go get actually tested, that's when it started to register like, okay, maybe this is a little bit bigger than a cold. I was told to go to the ER at one of the hospitals here and see if they would give me a test. So I showed up, there was a huge triage tent outside, and I wasn't really sure what to expect. And there were probably 50 people sitting in chairs, all with masks on, all looked miserable, just like I did. And I was there for about 2 hours, and I just continued to feel bad. And sitting there, I was like, I feel worse, I feel worse. My head was bobbing. I was like, wasn't necessarily losing consciousness, but I couldn't hold my head up. And so finally a doctor came over to me and was like, all right, you look pretty pitiful. Come over here. So he looked at me and he goes, I only have 6 tests. You are under the age of 65, so not a whole lot we can do for you there. You don't have any underlying conditions, and we don't know enough about this yet. And you're not in any way seem to be immunocompromised, so I can't give you one of these tests. We're calling you presumptive positive. They gave me an inhaler and told me to go home and quarantine. So that was on a Tuesday. By Thursday, I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't hold my head up. I couldn't walk to the bathroom. I couldn't hold a water bottle. And my body was just shut down. I called one of the hospitals down the street here and I was like, do you have tests? And the nurse was like, I can't really say, but just come in and let's see what we can do. I was given a test when I got there and I was admitted on the spot. They didn't even have a COVID section set up in the hospital because I was one of the first people here. And everyone was a little confused by me because at that point I was 26. They were like, we don't know, and I didn't have to be on a ventilator, so they weren't sure what to do with me. They would come in, we would do breathing treatments. I was given antibiotics. We tried a few different medicines and fluids and stuff, never really got any relief. I still had all of the symptoms that I started with, which were a high heart rate, no taste or smell. I couldn't actually eat anything either. I had no appetite. I couldn't keep any food down. I was really short of breath. My chest was really tight. I kind of felt my body, I just felt like I had been hit by a car. I had basically had every symptom with the exception of a fever. So I was there about 4 days, and I just went home with my inhaler and tried to drink as much water as I could and just kind of sat.
In Atlanta, Georgia, we met Ryan, a 33-year-old fitness instructor who was never hospitalized during his initial infection, but 5 months later couldn't kick the fatigue and difficulty breathing, among other lingering symptoms.
I had an inkling that I might get it just because of me working in the fitness industry and unfortunately just being in a state that wasn't necessarily taking it serious from the beginning. So I had a feeling, yes, I might get it. But my feeling was, I'm young, I'm healthy, therefore I should be fine. I was very cautious all of March, April, May. And then Atlanta and Georgia opened back up for business in late May. So with that, I was still very cautious, but in isolation, there are moments where you let your guard down slightly. It was middle of June and we were out at my pool. And then the next day, my spine really started to hurt. And it felt like kind of like the oncoming of a flu, but also I had gotten really sunburned. And I was like, all right, I'm just going to brush it off. It'll be fine. I'll take a cold shower. I'll take some, Tylenol. I'll be fine. And then it was like day 4 and it felt like my spine was going to break in half. Our testing in the beginning here in Atlanta was really bad. Really bad. You had to either wait 6 hours in line before a place opened up and hopefully you got a test, or you had to book online in advance, but everything was sold out. So the only place that I could find was about 60 miles away. But that night after I got the test, my fever spiked to 103. And I felt it. I knew something was wrong. And then right then and there, when my fever spiked to 103 is when it was like utter hell. My asthma immediately was out of control. And I'm on 2 different inhalers. One is a Prevental that you take every day, and one is a rescue inhaler, and even the rescue inhaler was not working. I had various spikes of heart rate. I would be just lying down on the couch, and if I sat up, my heart rate would spike to 150 immediately. I would bend down to go pick up the remote off the floor, and I would black out. The continuation of my spine feeling like it was going to break in half didn't go away. It was with me the whole time. So even sitting up or going to the bathroom was like climbing Mount Everest. It was terrible. It was terrible. And there was a bunch of times that I literally would just cry to my husband saying, like, I know we should go to the hospital, but I don't want to because they're going to slap me with a ventilator and I'm not going to get out. So I figured I would just ride it out in my apartment. I started to feel better, and then my fever went away. So I found a rapid place, but it was 50 miles away. And that came back negative. And then I got another test the next day and it was negative. So I was like, okay, I'm good. According to science, I'm good.
Chris caught COVID in May of 2020, but for the next several months, he was in and out of the hospital. When we met him 6 months later, he was at a rehab facility in Florida where he was in a wheelchair and on oxygen 24/7.
All I know is that I had a dream, and then within 24 hours, I'm sick with COVID. I literally came downstairs and laid on my mom's floor because I was upstairs and I kept having, like, I would get very, very cold or I would get very, very hot. And it just kept going back and forth. And I didn't know what was going on with me. And they was like, you need to maybe go to the hospital. And I was freaked out. They called them. I did not want to go because I don't know if I'm going to make it out of the hospital. So this was my first time going to the hospital. You know, first they tested me with a rapid test and they told me that I was negative, but they were going to keep me and they were going to do the regular test, which, you know, it takes a few days. And then they came and they moved me to the COVID floor in a low pressure room. That's when I found out I had COVID. Like when they went to move me, that's like, oh, you tested positive. And as soon as they told me I tested positive, it's like my whole world dropped. Fear just jumped on me because I had been hearing about people dying from COVID, and especially people that have underlying issues. And I have many underlying issues, sleep apnea, osteoarthritis, nerve damage. I use an asthma pump. I deal with chronic pain, gout, problems in my spine, you know, so many things, obesity. And I'm just in there and I'm like, I don't want to die. Because I'm feeling like really weak. I'm feeling pains that wasn't there before. And then just the overall fear of the pandemic, because it's not like you can just avoid what's going on because it's all around you 24/7, especially in the hospital. And then you constantly hear, you know, the alarms going off of people with complications. One of the worst parts of being in the hospital with COVID is hearing people screaming. It haven't really been any hospital that I've been admitted to on the COVID floor where you don't hear people screaming for help, because people don't know what's going on. They're hurting. You're feeling something you never felt before and that you really don't have any control over. Within 8 days, they released me to go home to quarantine myself.
2 weeks after I was discharged, I was in the backyard with Kyle, just walking up and down the pavement. And all of a sudden he kind of looked up at me and I collapsed. And I couldn't breathe anymore. So my legs were totally numb. We sat here for a minute and then he took me back to the ER. And they were like, yeah, okay, but we don't have any room and there's not much else we can do, just go home and rest. Every once in a while I'd call the doctors and be like, I can't get out of bed today. I can't do this. And they were like, we don't know. And at this point we are in May. I was like, this has been too long of this. I've had enough. And I tried to be patient with everything going on because nobody knew. It's not like these doctors were withholding information. Nobody knew what was going on. So I tried to be patient with, but I had had enough. I was like, I can't feel like this anymore. I'm tapped out. So I went and got a COVID test on a Friday and it was positive. So at this point I was positive, negative, positive, and I was shocked. I either got reinfected, I had a false negative in the middle, or we don't know. So I went to the ER. They wouldn't even let me see a doctor. And I came home. Kyle looked at me and he goes, pack your stuff. We're going to UAB in the morning. We drove up on a Tuesday morning, went through the ER, and I was like, I need some help here. And they admitted me. My breathing was really, really hard. I kept telling the nurse, I was like, my chest is getting tighter. I mean, I was like, something's wrong. Like, I know something's up. And all of a sudden, I don't remember a whole lot. My body totally like seized up. I couldn't breathe. I felt like my face was gonna like explode. It's the best way I can describe it. My arms and legs were like curling up. I had no control over anything, and I was kind of like losing consciousness, and I was just kind of bobbing my head. Doctors were just like rushing in, and everyone was just watching, and the doctors were trying to get an IV in, and we couldn't get an IV in. We couldn't get my blood pressure. My heart rate was astronomical. I couldn't get my breath. They tried to give me some medicine to calm everything down, and I couldn't, like, I felt like I wasn't even there. It was like an out of body experience of something's wrong. My body is totally shutting down. And I really thought that was it. I was like, okay, like it got me, and this is it. One of the last things I remember is they carted me off to an emergency CT. And then I don't remember much after that. I finally woke up in the morning, and this doctor came in, and he said, okay, in the 24 hours of you being admitted, here's what happened. And he showed me my CT scan when I got there, my CT scan from Wednesday night. And the first scan showed healthy lungs, little inflamed, but fine. The next one showed the bottoms of my lungs had collapsed, and it was kind of like working its way up. So he goes, somehow your lungs, the bottoms of your lungs collapsed. It's called atelectasis. And the good news is you treat your lungs like a muscle or like a balloon. You got to reinflate them, and that's something that can be done. So it's not necessarily all permanent damage, but that's what's happened. So that was really scary. It was the scariest moment of my whole life because I just thought that was it. So they started me on different breathing treatments to try to get that back up. And my very first time at BT, they put me on the stationary bike, and I lasted about 35 seconds before I was completely out of it, which for somebody who was just running 6 miles a day to not being able to do anything on a bike I was devastated. And where you were a few months ago, you're not there anymore. And it's not because you've just been sitting on the couch, like eating Cheetos, watching TV, like your body is kind of attacked itself.
I was feeling relieved, like, okay, I did it. Yay. Like, I'm on the other side of this. I should be fine. I went back to work, started teaching my cycling classes, my boot camp classes, like nothing happened. Obviously very cautious still with our protocols at work. And then about a week afterwards, like, I could not breathe. And it felt like a teenager was sitting on my chest. There was just like this constant pressure. I couldn't catch my breath walking up a flight of stairs. As a fitness instructor, walking up a flight of stairs, winded, stars. You would start to see those little light things when you get sort of lightheaded in your eyes. And I was like, this isn't okay. This isn't normal. And then I started to feel really tired. Like, I would teach one class and I would have to close my eyes right afterwards for a minimum of like 20 minutes just to go about my day. Immediately got super scared and super paranoid. And we immediately had to do a CAT scan to see if I had blood clots, which I didn't, thank God. But then we had to do an MRI, and there like was damage to my lungs. Just like small little, what she equated to like what a smoker's lung would look like, but not a heavy smoker, right? Which when I got those results back, it was kind of like the world just crumbled in front of my eyes. I was like, oh my God, I have lung damage. I've never smoked a cigarette in a day in my life. So this, like, why? And the doctors have no answers. They have no one has any answers. I had to get a nebulizer again, which I haven't had since I was like 9. So I have to be really careful. I have to make sure my iWatch is charged because I need to watch my heart rate every second of when I'm teaching. And if it gets too high, I have to stop and just coach. The only workouts that I can really do are like bar classes, yoga, and Pilates, which are very low impact. Your heart rate doesn't get super high, but mine still will get high, but not like doing cardio. Like if you ask me to do a burpee right now, I will faint. Straight up, I will faint. And it's been 148 days. I will absolutely faint.
So I go home. Within a few days, I'm back. And this time is really bad. Like they have me on oxygen because it's like it's so busy. Like the hospital is at capacity. So they're actually waiting for other people to get discharged just to get you inside of a room. And I'm to the point that I didn't even want to be here anymore. Like I actually was eternally like talking to God, like just like thoughts like, God, I don't want to be here. And I'm hearing God telling me that I'm gonna be okay, that He created me for a time like this. When you're laying in bed in pain and you can't move and you're having all these frustrations, all these complications, and you hear a voice tell you the only way you're gonna die if I withdraw my breath from your lungs, and I created you for a time as this, it got really real for me. For the first time in my life, I realized that I don't have control over my life. They kept me for like a week there, treated me, and I thought things were getting better. So I went home again. Maybe a week or two, I started having trouble breathing again. I was laying on my stomach, on my chest, and started feeling like I was underwater. So I went to the hospital. It seemed like almost every other day I'm back in either for side effects of medication or just from symptoms going on in my body that they can't really pinpoint. At this time, I've already had it for like 6 weeks, like 5 or 6 weeks. And within the first 5 or 6 weeks, I lost 50 pounds. Like I can't eat really. I'm really weak. I can't really walk. My heart rate, if I walk like 10 feet, my heart rate jumps to 150 or 60. So now they have me in this facility and they're giving me all this stuff and I'm having all these side effects from the meds and stuff. And they tell me I need to try to walk. And I'm thinking like, of course I can walk. I've been walking. But for some reason I couldn't walk. I don't know how to explain it, but they told me that from losing so much weight that my muscle mass, I was losing muscle mass. And they also told me because it was attacking my respiratory system and I had been down, up and down so long that it finally just had hit me hard. And I couldn't even walk. I tried to walk to the bathroom one time and within 5 seconds, my oxygen dropped from 100 to 78%. And the thing about it, I never was on the respirator, but looking back at it now, I think I was right at the door of being on the respirator because your oxygen isn't supposed to drop like that. So they started giving me antibiotics, not only antibiotics, they started giving me stuff to open up my lungs, to make my lungs get stronger. So they started walking me through therapy. And things started looking up. I felt like I was getting better after 2 or 3 weeks. They finally told me I was COVID negative on July 17th. So from May 26th to July 17th, I had COVID, but they told me now I was COVID free. Hey, what's up, everybody, man? I just want to give y'all an update. Hey, I'm at the hospital, man. I'm home. Got to take some medication for the next 40 days for my lungs. Got to really take it easy. But, man, God is so faithful. So I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to be back to normal. That's not what happened. I went home. And within a week, I ended up back in the hospital having trouble breathing again.
But one thing that started happening after UAB was I started to have these episodes, is what we ended up calling them. The way it was explained to me was your body kind of goes into a panic attack. It's not like a panic attack where you like see a spider and freak out. This is like your body starts attacking itself and can't regulate its temperature, its motion, your heart rate. It just kind of shuts down. So those started happening on the dot every 2 weeks on a Wednesday night after 10 o'clock. And it was so weird how on cue they always were every 2 weeks. I would shake, I wouldn't remember, my eyes would roll back, I couldn't hold my head up. It lasted about 45 minutes and then I was exhausted. I couldn't move my arms or legs. Like I felt like I had just like done a crazy workout and then I was just limp because my body was so tense when it was happening. And then it would just kind of release and I would be done. So I made a few appointments. We did different EEGs and scans that we could do. And they're like, everything's coming back pretty normal. And I was like, okay, but this isn't normal. So they gave me some medicine to try to like help manage that when it would happen, but we couldn't explain why it was happening. I still continue to have all of my symptoms from the very beginning to now, still no fever. I felt like I was always the exception to everything going on and nobody could explain it. And I had nobody that related to it. So I felt like a huge like anomaly of what am I? Like what is happening? You know, when you feel like you've been hit by a truck every day, you don't know when it's gonna end, when the pain's gonna stop, when you're gonna start feeling better, because this is something I don't think I'll ever put behind me mentally, but also physically. I think this is gonna be something long term that I'm gonna have to deal with as we learn more information. But at this point, I am, God, was it at 7-8 months into this? I was a healthy 27-year-old who had no underlying conditions and was running every day to nothing.
When you get past month 3 and 4, it becomes a lot of neurological issues. I lose my balance. I can't remember anything. My brain fog is terrible. Terrible. I really hope I don't lose my train of focus during this, but like I'll be on the phone with my mom and I'll forget who I'm talking to. Like I will straight up see my husband feed the dog dinner, and then 3 minutes later I'll ask him if he fed the dog. And then 2 more minutes after that I'll ask him if he fed the dog. It's almost like dementia. And it's frightening. I lost my hair. Started to fall out in massive chunks. I was never able to see my scalp before. You can see my scalp. I'll wake up in the morning sometimes and I'll think like, is that dog hair or is that my hair on my pillow? It's terrible. It's absolutely terrible because there's nothing you can do. And people, you have to kind of make people understand before you start finding people who have had it. You are just kind of on your own, in your own world, being gaslit by society of like, it's fake, this is fake, it's the government, no, 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 no. And you're like, no, it's not. Like, I'm legit sick. I have pre-existing conditions, but I'm 33. And now I feel like I have the lungs of a 75-year-old.
So now they hospitalized me again.
Hey, what's up, y'all? Man, it's crazy. I'm kind of weary of constantly being in and out of the hospital so much. This is my second time back in the last few days.
They tell me that I'm still positive for COVID. And that's something I don't understand. Because I'm like, how was I negative, but now I'm positive again? I keep going back and forth. I'm still dealing with side effects from medication they have me on, but I keep coming up negative. I'm realizing that I can't just get back to normal. I go home, I try to take a shower one day, got out the shower, laid on the bed. I couldn't catch my breath for like 2 or 3 hours. I'm having shortness of breath. And at this point, I've done so many x-rays and CAT scans, I'm thinking I'm going to turn to an X-Man. You know, I think I'm going to be like radioactive or something because I'm steady doing these things. And they're telling me they're not seeing anything. Well, this time it comes back different. They tell me that my lungs look like shattered glass. So they went ahead and they did a EGD to see if any more damage had happened in my stomach post-COVID. And they found I had erosion on my stomach. My stomach lining wasn't so great. Inflammation in my stomach, so I had chronic gastritis. And that's when they hospitalized me for this last time. They started searching for a rehabilitation facility to put me in. I've had been there for like 7 or 8 days. They found this place and they transported me here. But they have a better understanding of people that deal with COVID. Because like I'm the youngest person here. My roommate before this was like 90. My roommate now is 88 years old. This is like my third week being here. I've been doing physical therapy like sometimes 4 or 5 days a week. On the days I can actually do it. I've been on oxygen since I've been here. They've been doing breathing treatments, like 4 or 5 breathing treatments per day. And they just got to the point that today they said that I didn't have to do them anymore. So now it's just kind of like a waiting game. They're trying to get my endurance and stuff up and just continue to treat me. It's been quite a journey.
One of the unfortunate outcomes from COVID-19 is something known as post-COVID conditions.
The symptoms of this include fatigue, shortness of breath, sleep disorders, fevers, GI symptoms, anxiety and depression, and what some have been referring to as brain fog, or an inability or a difficulty in concentrating or focusing.
Even people who did not have symptoms when they were infected can have post-COVID conditions.
That approximately 30% of the patients who were enrolled at the University of Washington reported persistent symptoms for as long as 9 months.
We have seen post-COVID conditions in people of all ages.
And can range from mild, annoying to actually quite incapacitating. The magnitude of the problem is not yet fully known.
Ongoing symptoms quickly came to the attention of COVID support groups like Survivor Corps, founded by Diana Berrent. They started conducting studies with medical and scientific researchers to better understand long COVID and help those suffering with lingering symptoms.
So I started Survivor Corps on March 24th, 2020, while I was still in isolation with COVID, with the mission of really connecting survivors with the scientific and medical community. And we started to see within a couple of weeks, by mid-April, that many of our members were not recovering. And even ones who had very mild and even asymptomatic cases were developing long COVID regardless.
Based off of your studies, what are the most common symptoms of long COVID?
I would say that the most common things that we are seeing are exercise intolerance, cognitive dysfunction, neuropathic pain that mimics advanced diabetes, Parkinsonian-like tremors, damage to the heart, damage to the lungs, gastrointestinal issues that are so bad that people have been put on feeding tubes. Extreme pain. There is no organ that this disease does not affect. We originally thought about COVID as a respiratory disease. We quickly then understood that it was a vascular and inflammatory disease as well. I believe that we will look back on long COVID as largely a neurological disease. And also, the extent of the damage runs, as we talked about, runs to every organ. That includes dental. It includes the eyes. It includes the organs that are not covered by our regular insurance policies.
Have your studies been able to identify how long symptoms last on average?
We don't know how long, and there's no way of predicting how long it will last.
Have you been able to identify any markers that might make someone more susceptible to long COVID?
No.
I know that's a tricky one.
I wish we could. We're trying to find biomarkers of long COVID so that we can get closer to a treatment. But in terms of who's susceptible, I would say the only categorization that I can make generally is that the average long hauler is a woman in her early 40s who was in perfectly good health beforehand. One of the theories behind long COVID is that it is an unregulated overresponse of the immune system. And who has the most robust immune system? Young, healthy people who primarily are women, and just the way women are more susceptible to autoimmune diseases for the exact same reason. So in many ways, the younger and healthier you are more of a candidate for long COVID. When we looked at was there one symptom that we could identify as being predictive of long COVID? Was it having a cough? Was it having a fever? Was it having a headache? Do you know what it was? It was being asymptomatic.
Interesting.
That should make you shake in your boots.
Do we have any idea of the numbers of people who are getting long COVID at this point?
According to the CDC, it's 1 in 3. And the number for children has been 1 in 10, although that is likely a vast undercount because babies and toddlers can't express if there's something wrong. Look, before Omicron even hit, statisticians were estimating that there had been 150 million actual infections, which 1 out of 3, you're looking at 50 million people. And that was before Omicron.
Where do you think we'll be in, say, 5 years, 10 years with all of this? Is there an underlying health crisis that people are not paying attention to right now?
This is our shadow pandemic. We are not only looking at the largest mass disabling event in our country's history, we need to think about what a neurological effects are, people not being able to go back to work. This is going to have a phenomenal impact on not just our healthcare system, our disability system, our social security system, but also on the economy. We'll have shortages in our, labor market. It's just there's no end to the impacts that this is going to cause. This is going to be a generational trauma. And we need, real guidance. We need a command center within the government that is focused solely on long COVID. We need every agency to be involved. We need every county's Board of Health to be involved. We need every hospital involved and every clinician. And we need to give patients the same information that we're giving doctors, because patients are their own best advocates. As they say, when you need an expert, find a patient.
Emily, Ryan, and Chris were some of the first people we met with long COVID, but certainly not the last. More on long COVID to come later. After making our way down the East Coast, we headed west to New Mexico and Arizona to meet survivors on the Navajo Nation.
In this land, there are natural things that can make people sick. The land can defend itself.
If you live on the res, not much goes on here. And then boom, it hits your town and then you're on the news.
I'm not too sure what, the real numbers are, when it comes to death, but there has been a lot. There's been a lot of deaths.
Every single one of these came through our facility.
It just feels like, like there's a madman with a gun randomly shooting people. He looked you in the eye and was ready to hit the trigger, and for some reason or another just continued on.